The alien warrior's last stand. The war had raged for days, and the battlefield was silent. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind of silence that echoed with death, pain, and loss. The alien warrior lay motionless, his body twisted in agony. His once proud frame, a symbol of fear across galaxies, was now shattered and broken. Paralyzed from the waist down, he couldn't move, couldn't fight. His enemies had left him for dead, and the sounds of their retreat were now distant echoes, blood-green and thick like sap stained the dirt beneath him. His chest heaved with every breath, each one sharp and painful. His hands, once deadly weapons, now trembled as he weakly reached for his weapon. But it was too far, and the strength he had spent his entire life building had drained from him. The battlefield around him was littered with the remains of both his allies and enemies, an empty reminder of the fight he had lost. His species had long been known for their fighting prowess, their ability to crush any enemy that dared to face them. But now he was nothing more than a wounded animal, discarded by his own people. The alien warrior's mind raced. Was this how it ended for him? The great warrior who had once stood side by side with legends? His eyes, though filled with pain, scanned the dark sky. Stars flickered above like distant witnesses to his fall. His thoughts drifted to his home planet, the place where he had trained, where he had been raised to be a weapon. He thought of his family, his people, those he had fought to protect. What would they think of him now? Was he still their hero, or had he become a forgotten relic? The shame of his defeat weighed heavily on him. The warrior's pride had been his greatest strength, but now, it felt like his greatest weakness. Through his blurred vision, he could see the shadow of movement. Someone was coming. A figure, tall and unfamiliar, walked slowly toward him. His heart skipped a beat. Another enemy? The last thing he wanted was to face death at the hands of another foe. But to his surprise, it wasn't an alien warrior that approached him. It was a human soldier. The human's footsteps were heavy on the dirt as he moved, a rifle slung over his shoulder. His face was grim, eyes scanning the surroundings as if searching for threats. The alien warrior couldn't understand why this human would approach him. What did he want? Was this the end? Was he going to be killed by this human soldier, like so many of his kind had been slaughtered before? The human soldier paused when he saw the alien warrior lying helpless on the ground. His hand instinctively went to the side of his rifle, but he didn't raise it. Instead, his gaze softened as if he had seen something more than just an enemy in the alien's wounded state. The warrior's mind raced, confusion swirling in the haze of his pain. The human stepped forward slowly, cautiously. The warrior could see the hesitation in his eyes. It was clear this human had never faced a creature like him before. Yet, in the soldier's gaze, there was something more than fear. There was curiosity, perhaps even empathy. The alien warrior could hardly believe. Was this human really going to help him? "Stay back," the warrior rasped, his voice hoarse from the pain in the battle. His words were weak, but the human seemed to understand. The soldier didn't speak, but his eyes told a different story. There was no hesitation now. He was determined to help, though he didn't fully understand the cost of his decision. The warrior's breath quickened. The enemy had left him behind to die, but this human was walking toward him. He had seen the cruelty of humans firsthand, how they would kill without mercy. But this was different. There was no gun raised, no threat in the soldier's stance. It was as if the human soldier had made a decision to defy the very nature of his own people's hatred for the aliens. The warrior tried to push himself up, but his body wouldn't obey. Every movement sent pain shooting through him, and he collapsed back to the ground with a low growl. The human soldier crouched beside him, his movements careful and deliberate. He placed his hand on the warrior's shoulder, steadying him. "Don't worry," the human said quietly, his voice calm, but with an edge of determination. "I'm not leaving you here." The warrior's heart skipped a beat. Was this a trap? The last thing he wanted was to trust this human, but the soldiers rang in his ears. I'm not leaving you here. The warrior's pride warred with his desperation. Could he allow himself to trust this human soldier? Could he really accept help from the very species he had fought against for so long? But deep down, he knew that if he didn't accept this help, if he didn't let this human soldier take him from the battlefield, his fate was sealed. The warrior's last thoughts drifted to the endless wars, to the battles that had brought him to this point. And as the human soldier carefully began to drag him away from the wreckage of the battlefield, the alien warrior closed his eyes. Maybe this human wasn't so different after all. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for both of them. Reluctant allies, the quiet hum of the wind was the only sound as the human soldier, Ethan, carefully maneuvered the alien warrior through the dense jungle. His heart raced with every step, not just because of the danger lurking around them, but because of the strange feeling he had. He wasn't just carrying an injured soldier. He was carrying an alien, a being from another world who had fought wars for centuries. Ethan had heard the stories, seen the battles on the news. The alien warriors were ruthless, merciless. And now, one was in his hands, completely vulnerable. The warrior, whose name was Zarlak, lay motionless, his once powerful form now limp. His breathing was shallow, a steady reminder of the injury that had paralyzed him. Zarlak's eyes were fixed on the path ahead, scanning for any sign of danger, but his body was betraying him. Despite his imposing figure, the alien warrior had never been weaker. Ethan stole a glance at him. Zarlak's skin, a dull shade of emerald green, was covered in dirt and blood. His eyes, though clouded with pain, still held the intensity that made him a force to be reckoned with. But now he was nothing more than a heavy burden to Ethan. The weight of Zarlak's body strained Ethan's muscles, but it wasn't just the physical load that was hard to carry. It was the responsibility of keeping a fierce enemy alive. I should have left you there, Ethan muttered under his breath, the words filled with uncertainty. His voice was barely audible, drowned by the sounds of the alien jungle around them. But still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just survival. Zarlak's head turned slightly toward him. The movement was slow, weak, but it held a silent challenge. You should have, the warrior rasped, his voice low and filled with bitterness. But you didn't. Why? Ethan winced at the alien's words. The truth was, he didn't know why he hadn't left Zarlak to die. It went against everything he'd been taught. Humans didn't save their enemies, especially not a creature like this. But something had stopped him, something deep inside him that he couldn't explain. Was it compassion, or was it something else? Something about this warrior, this alien, stirred something in him that made him question everything he had ever believed about his enemies. You. You were going to die, Ethan said, still trying to make sense of it. I couldn't just leave you there. Zarlak let out a short, mocking laugh despite his pain. You don't have to lie. You are not my savior. Why then? The question hung in the air like a weight, and Ethan found it harder to breathe. He had expected the alien to be angry, but not curious. Zarlak had been a soldier, a killer. And now he was looking at Ethan with those intense, calculating eyes, as if trying to figure out why a human would go against the grain of his instincts. Ethan took a deep breath, shifting his grip on the alien warrior. I don't know, maybe we're not so different after all, he admitted quietly. Maybe. I don't want to be the kind of person who just leaves someone to die, no matter who they are. For a moment, there was silence. The only sounds were the distant calls of strange creatures and the steady rhythm of their footsteps. Ethan glanced at the sky above them, a purple twilight creeping over the horizon. There was no turning back now. They were in this together. The warrior shifted slightly, his eyes closing as he tried to focus on breathing. The pain was unbearable, but something deeper, had changed. Ethan wasn't his enemy anymore. The alien had no words for this sudden shift in perspective. His pride, once his greatest weapon, was now a burden. But there was something about Ethan's determination, his quiet refusal to let him die, that made Zarlak reconsider. For the first time since their paths had crossed, Zarlak felt the smallest glimmer of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely alone in this universe. The uneasy alliance between the human and the alien had just begun, and neither of them knew where it would lead. But one thing was clear: they were no longer enemies. At least not yet. The fight for survival, the air was thick with tension. The silence of the jungle broken only by the distant sounds of alien wildlife. Ethan and Zarlak had trekked for hours, each step heavier than the last. The alien warrior's strength was fading, but his will to survive hadn't yet. The weight of their situation hung over them, and Ethan knew the jungle wasn't their only threat. The enemy was still out there, hunting them both, and the deadly creatures of this world were relentless. Zarlak, despite his injuries, was alert. His sharp golden eyes scanned every movement, every rustle of leaves. He could feel it, the presence of something nearby, something watching them. It wasn't just the predators of this alien world. It was something more. Ethan, sensing the shift in the air, stopped dead in his tracks. "What is it?" Ethan whispered, his voice tense. He instinctively reached for his rifle, his fingers brushing the grip. He wasn't sure what they were up against, but he knew it wouldn't be friendly. Zarlak's head slowly turned to meet Ethan's gaze, his voice a low growl. "We are being hunted. Stay close." Before Ethan could respond, a chilling screech pierced the air. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, part growl, part shriek. It sent a shiver down his spine. He felt a primal fear rise in his chest, but he pushed it aside. He wasn't about to let fear control him, not now. "Stay sharp, Ethan," ordered, his pulse quickening. He kept his rifle raised, scanning the jungle for any sign of movement. His mind raced. Was it a predator, or were they about to be ambushed by the enemy? Then, from the shadows of the dense foliage, a pair of glowing eyes emerged, faint at first, then growing larger, closer. The predator was coming for them. Ethan raised his rifle, aiming at the approaching shape. But before he could pull the trigger, Zarlak's hand shot out, stopping him. "Don't shoot," Zarlak ordered, his voice rough with pain. "It is not your enemy." Confused, Ethan lowered his weapon slightly, but his instincts screamed at him to be ready. The creature that stepped into view was like nothing he had seen before. Its sleek, dark body was covered in scales that shimmered in the dim light. It moved with a predator's grace, but its movements were calculated, intelligent. Its eyes locked onto Ethan and Zarlak as if weighing them, studying them. The creature was a hybrid of deadly speed and cunning. Its large, razor-sharp teeth gleamed in the dim light, but there was something almost graceful about it. Ethan's heart pounded as the creature circled them, its gaze unwavering. "Is this one of your kind?" Ethan whispered, still not lowering his rifle. He didn't trust the creature, and he certainly didn't trust Zarlak enough to let his guard down. Zarlak's gaze remained fixed on the creature. "No, but it is a protector." Before Ethan could process that information, the creature made its move. With a terrifying speed, it lunged straight at Zarlak. Ethan's instincts kicked in. His rifle raised again, but this time, Zarlak wasn't helpless. Despite his injuries, the alien warrior reacted faster than Ethan could comprehend. With a fluid, almost graceful motion, Zarlak drew his blade and struck, parrying the creature's attack with precision. The creature recoiled, a hiss escaping its throat. Ethan watched, stunned, as the alien warrior fought back with a level of skill that could only come from a lifetime of training. Zarlak's movements were swift. his pain seemingly forgotten in the heat of the fight. Ethan barely had time to aim his rifle at the creature, but before he could fire, it darted away into the shadows, vanishing as quickly as it had come. Battle was over almost as soon as it had started. Breathing heavily, Zarlak stood tall, his chest heaving with effort. He didn't look at Ethan, but the human could sense the warrior's pride, even in this moment of weakness. It wasn't a victory, they had merely survived. The creature wasn't dead, but for now they were safe. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. What the hell was that thing? He asked, still gripping his rifle tightly. Zarlak wiped the blood from his blade, his voice calm, almost distant. A protector, as I said. Not all of us are enemies. Some are guardians of this world. But you must understand, it does not see us as allies. Then why didn't it kill us? Ethan asked, his brow furrowed. Zarlak turned toward him, his expression unreadable. Because it knows when to fight and when to let go, he said cryptically. It knows we are not the enemy. But it also knows that we are not safe. Not here, not yet. A long silence passed between them as they both caught their breath. Ethan glanced around, realizing that they weren't out of danger yet. The jungle seemed to be closing in on them, and the unknown predator had left them with more questions than answers. I guess we're not done yet, are we? Ethan muttered, more to himself than to Zarlak. Zarlak's gaze softened, just for a moment. No. Human, the fight is far from over. Unlikely friendship. The days that followed the jungle encounter were nothing short of grueling. Every step felt heavier than the last. But somehow, despite the odds, Ethan and Zarlak continued their trek, their bond slowly growing with each passing day. Neither spoke much, words were few, but their actions spoke volumes. The alien warrior had become less a stranger and more of a companion, though neither of them fully understood the depth of what was forming between them. As they walked through the dense underbrush, Zarlak's sharp eyes constantly scanned their surroundings. Ethan, too, had grown more vigilant, his senses sharpened by the constant threat of attack. The jungle had a way of revealing danger at the most unexpected moments. But there was something different now, an unspoken understanding. Between the two of them, they were no longer enemies. They had become reluctant partners in a battle for survival. That evening, as they made camp beneath the canopy of alien trees, the stillness of the night began to settle in. The jungle, usually filled with sounds of creatures and rustling leaves, was eerily quiet. Ethan noticed the silence almost immediately. Something's off, he muttered under his breath, his hand instinctively going to the grip of his rifle. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. Zarlak, who had been sitting a little distance away, turned his head toward him. There was no fear in his expression, just a quiet readiness. It is not the jungle, Zarlak said simply, his voice calm yet carrying an edge of warning. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? For the first time since they had met, Zarlak spoke of his past, his voice filled with a strange kind of weight. Where I come from, silence is not a good sign, he said. It means something is watching, waiting. Ethan's pulse quickened. Are you telling me that someone is out there? The alien nodded. Not someone, something. As the words hung in the air, Ethan's mind raced, trying to make sense of the alien warrior's cryptic statement. The jungle had never been silent like this before. And if Zarlak was right, something was closing in. A low rumble broke the silence, a strange sound, unlike any animal Ethan had heard before. It was distant, but unmistakable. It was the kind of noise that made the ground vibrate underfoot. Zarlak stood, his gaze hardening. He knew what was coming. Ethan's hand tightened around his rifle as the sound grew louder, closer. He didn't know what was out there, but he wasn't about to wait and find out. What is that? He asked urgently. Not what, Zarlak replied, his voice colder now. Who? The moment the word left his lips, the ground shook again, this time much harder. Then, from the depths of the jungle, a massive figure emerged, a hulking silhouette. In the dim light, it moved with terrifying speed, despite its enormous size, and before Ethan could even lift his rifle, the creature was upon them. Ethan's heart stopped for a moment as he saw what had been hidden in the shadows. The creature was something out of a nightmare, a massive armored beast with glowing red eyes, standing over 10 feet tall. Its muscles rippled beneath thick spiked armor, and a series of razor-sharp blades extended from its limbs. Gleaming ominously in the fading light, it was a predator, but not one they could fight with brute force. "Stay behind me," Zarlak ordered, his voice commanding. Ethan wanted to protest, but he didn't. The alien warrior was injured, weakened from his past battles, but he still stood tall in front of Ethan, ready to face the creature head-on. For the first time, Ethan saw vulnerability in Zarlak, not in his strength, but in the way he understood the limits of his own power. Zarlak stepped forward, raising his sword, the blade gleaming as he prepared for the fight. "This is not a fight for a single warrior," he said quietly, almost as if to himself. "This is a battle for two." Ethan didn't have time to question his words. The beast roared, charging with blinding speed, its eyes fixed on Zarlak. Without thinking, Ethan dropped to a crouch, rifle raised, and aimed at the beast's exposed underbelly. He had one shot, and it had to count. The alien warrior, though injured, moved with a grace that belied his condition. He swung his blade with deadly precision, blocking the beast's initial strike and driving the creature back a few steps. But it wasn't enough. The beast was relentless. Ethan fired. The shot echoed through the jungle, hitting the creature square in its side. It howled in pain but didn't stop. If anything, it only grew angrier. Zarlak glanced at Ethan, a flicker of acknowledgement in his eyes. "Now we fight together," he said. Ethan nodded, understanding now what Zarlak had meant. They weren't just two soldiers anymore. This was about survival, about trust. Without a second thought, Ethan took another shot, this time aiming for the creature's exposed eye. The beast screamed in fury, but it staggered, giving Zarlak the opening he needed. With a single powerful strike, Zarlak drove his blade deep into the creature's chest, ending its life. As the massive predator fell to the ground, its body shaking with the final moments of life, both Ethan and Zarlak stood there, panting heavily. They had fought together, not as enemies, but as allies. For the first time since their paths had crossed, Ethan felt a strange sense of camaraderie. They had survived together. And though neither of them said it out loud, something unspoken had shifted. This battle wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about partnership. "I guess we make a good team," Ethan said, breaking the silence. Zarlak didn't respond right away. He simply looked at Ethan for a long moment, then nodded once. "Yes, human, we do." Betrayal and hope. The crackling fire cast eerie shadows across the jungle as Ethan and Zarlak sat in silence. The battle with the creature had taken everything out of them, but somehow they had survived together. The jungle around them was dark and foreboding, a world that seemed to close in on them with every passing minute. And though they had triumphed, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was still lurking. Something far worse than the beast they had already faced. Zarlak sat across from him, his eyes lost in the flames, as if he too was wrestling with some deep, unspoken thought. The warrior's wounds were healing, but slowly. The alien's pride, however, was far from broken. Ethan watched him for a moment, wondering how the creature who had once struck fear into entire worlds could now sit before him, looking so human. "Do you ever think about it?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice breaking the quiet. "What happens next?" Zarlak's gaze lifted, meeting his. "What happens next?" The warrior repeated, as though the concept of a future had never crossed his mind. "We survive, we fight." Ethan nodded, but there was doubt in his eyes. But for how long? How many more battles until we're both too broken to keep going? Zarlak studied him for a moment, the flickering firelight casting a harsh glow across his face. We fight until there is nothing left to fight for, he said softly. But Ethan could tell by the tone in his voice that even the warrior wasn't so certain anymore. Just as Ethan opened his mouth to respond, the sound of movement from the jungle's edge froze them both in place. The hairs on the back of Ethan's neck stood on end. It wasn't an animal. It was something else, too deliberate, too calculated. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Stay low," he whispered to Zarlak, reaching for his rifle. But before he could get a firm grip, a voice cold and familiar cut through the night. "You should have left him to die." Ethan's blood ran cold. The voice belonged to someone he recognized, someone he had trusted. He spun around, rifle raised, but there was no enemy in sight. Just the haunting, familiar figure stepping out of the shadows. "Carter?" Ethan's voice trembled with disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Carter, once a fellow soldier and trusted comrade, emerged from the shadows, his expression cold. His uniform was no longer the same, tattered, stained with blood, and bearing signs of betrayal. And the glint in his eyes made Ethan's stomach turn. "You should have left him behind." "Ethan," Carter repeated, his voice sharp and full of contempt. "Now you've just signed your death sentence, and his." Ethan felt the weight of the words hang in the air, a heavy cloud of dread settling over him. Carter had been one of the soldiers sent to retrieve him and Zarlak. But now it was clear, Carter wasn't here to rescue them. He was here to finish the job. Zarlak moved slightly, his blade catching the firelight as he shifted into a ready stance. Ethan's heart raced, realizing that the alien warrior wasn't afraid, but was rather prepared to defend himself and Ethan once again. But the situation had changed. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. This wasn't about an enemy. This was about betrayal from one of their own. Ethan felt his pulse quicken, his instincts screaming at him to act. But Carter raised his hands, a twisted smirk on his face. "Don't bother," he taunted. "You think you can stop me? You think your little alien friend can protect you? He's just a casualty of war, just like you." Ethan took a step back, his mind racing. "What happened to you, Carter?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion and disbelief. "We were brothers in arms, back in the fight. What's this all about?" Carter's eyes flickered with a flicker of something, anger, resentment, or maybe something deeper. "It's about survival, Ethan, about power. I was ordered to let you both die, but I see now that I was wrong. You should have been left behind, and now you will be." Before Ethan could react, Carter's hand moved to a hidden weapon. The familiar crack of a stun grenade hit the air, sending a wave of panic through Ethan's chest. The ground beneath them exploded with force, throwing Ethan and Zarlak to the ground. For a split second, everything went black dot when Ethan came to. The world was spinning. His head throbbed, his vision blurry. But the first thing he noticed was the emptiness. Zarlak wasn't beside him. Panic gripped him as he forced himself to sit up, only to find that the jungle had shifted. There were no signs of the alien warrior or Carter. "Zarlak!" Ethan called out, his voice hoarse, his pulse pounding in his ears. The jungle responded only with the rustle of leaves. The betrayal wasn't just from Carter. It was from the world itself, a world that was never as it seemed. And now in the silence that followed, Ethan realized the truth. Zarlak was gone, and he was alone, but not for long. There was hope, but it was fleeting, hanging by the thinnest thread. The ultimate sacrifice. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he staggered through the dense underbrush, the taste of blood still fresh in his mouth. His eyes darted from side to side, searching desperately for any sign of Zarlak. But all he found was silence. The jungle that had once seemed so alive now felt like a tomb. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The betrayal had shattered him, not just because of Carter's treachery, but because of the absence of his ally, the alien warrior who had, against all odds, fought. Beside him, Zarlak was gone, vanished into the heart of the jungle, and Ethan had no idea where to turn. He had failed him. The thought gnawed at his insides, each step forward feeling like a betrayal of its own. But then, through the veil of his panic, he heard it, a faint, distant sound that broke the stillness. A low, guttural voice, one that didn't belong to Carter, and definitely not to anything human. "Ethan," the voice said. Barely a whisper. It was Zarlak's voice. Raspy and weak, but unmistakably his. Ethan's legs almost gave way beneath him, his relief overwhelming. He stumbled toward the source of the sound, pushing past branches and thorny vines. The air grew colder as he neared, and the faint glow of firelight flickered in the distance, casting long shadows on the jungle floor. When Ethan broke through the last line of trees, his eyes fell on Zarlak, kneeling before a stone altar that seemed out of place in this alien jungle. Blood stained the warrior's armor, his body battered, but his gaze was steady. He had been waiting for Ethan, but not in the way the human expected. "Zarlak," Ethan breathed, rushing to his side. "What happened? Where's Carter?" The alien warrior lifted his hand slowly, signaling Ethan to stop. His face, usually full of defiance, was now a mask of solemn acceptance. The firelight caught the sharp edges of his features, making him appear both regal and broken at the same time. "Carter will not come for us," Zarlak said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "He's already made his choice." Ethan looked around frantically, the sense of urgency rising. "We have to get out of here. If we stay any longer, we'll both die." Zarlak turned to him, a glimmer of something in his eyes, something older, something wiser. "You are right. We do not have much time, but there is something I must do first." "What?" Ethan asked, confusion and fear creeping into his voice. The alien warrior's lips parted, and his gaze lifted to the sky, as if he could see beyond the trees to some faraway horizon. "My people, my tribe, they left me to die. They betrayed me. I was supposed to be their savior, their leader. But I failed them, just as I failed you." Ethan shook his head, trying to dismiss the thoughts racing through his mind. "No. You didn't fail, you saved me. You've saved both of us every step of the way." Zarlak's expression softened, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Maybe," he murmured. "But now, I must give them what they would never give me: redemption." Ethan stared at him, his heart racing. He didn't understand. "What do you mean? Redemption for what?" Zarlak's hand moved to his chest, where a ceremonial dagger was sheathed. It was a weapon of great significance, one that had once been used in rituals of strength and sacrifice. He grasped the hilt firmly, his fingers curling around the blade. "I was once a warrior of great power, but that power has corrupted me," Zarlak said, his voice quiet but resolute. "I must do what I should have done long ago. I must end my own pain and the suffering I have caused." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. "No, Zarlak, don't do this. You don't have to." But the alien warrior only shook his head slowly. "It is the only way to set things right. If I die for a purpose. My species will understand the sacrifice. I will become what they could never accept, the leader who sacrificed himself for the greater good." Ethan's mind spun with the weight of what Zarlak was saying. He couldn't allow it, he couldn't lose another ally, not now, not after everything they had been through. He reached out, grabbing Zarlak's arm. "You don't have to do this. You can still fight. You can still be the warrior you were meant to be." Zarlak looked down at him, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I have fought for so long, human. But I am not the warrior I once was. And neither are you." Ethan's heart clenched as he realized the depth of Zarlak's words. The alien wasn't just talking about his wounds, he was speaking about the way they both had been broken by The war, by betrayal, by survival. Both of them had lost something vital along the way, and Zarlak had made peace with it. But Ethan wasn't ready to let go. He wasn't ready to lose someone who had become his closest companion, his unexpected friend. "No," Ethan said again, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not alone. We're in this together." Zarlak's hand hovered over the dagger, his eyes searching Ethan's face, looking for something he had never allowed himself to find, hope. And for the first time, Zarlak hesitated. The wind picked up, rustling through the trees, as if the jungle itself was holding its breath. The moment stretched on, the weight of choice hanging between them like a dark cloud. Ethan's fingers tightened around Zarlak's wrist, pulling the alien's hand away from the blade. "You can't die, Zarlak," Ethan said fiercely. "We've survived too much. I won't let you throw it all away." Zarlak's gaze softened, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of trust, real, raw trust in the warrior's eyes. "Then fight with me, human," Zarlak said quietly, his voice steady but filled with the strength of someone who had finally found a reason to live. And just like that, the air between them shifted. Ethan knew that whatever came next, whatever battles they still had to face, they would face them together. A new beginning. The sun rose slowly over the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. The jungle, once a place of constant danger, now seemed peaceful, almost serene. But Ethan knew better than to trust the calm. The past few days had shown him just how quickly peace could turn to chaos. Yet, as he stood beside Zarlak, both of them battered, exhausted, and scarred, there was something different in the air. Something he couldn't quite name, but felt deep within. They had made it through the worst, together. The final battle with the remaining forces of their enemies had been brutal. It had pushed them both to their limits, but they had come out victorious. For the first time since they had met, Ethan allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at a life beyond the constant fight, beyond the survival instinct that had driven them for so long. Zarlak stood beside him, his posture not as rigid as it once had been. The alien warrior's armor was cracked and tarnished, a testament to the battles he had fought and the ones he had survived. He was no longer the untouchable force of nature that had stepped onto the battlefield months ago. He was something different now. Something human. Ethan glanced at him, his heart heavy with the weight of all that had happened. "You ready for this?" he asked, his voice a little softer than usual. Zarlak's eyes, once cold and unyielding, now seemed filled with something new, something like understanding. "For what?" the alien warrior replied, his voice quieter than before, as if the questions he had carried for so long were finally beginning to find answers. "To move forward," Ethan said, glancing out at the world stretching before them. "To find something better, something worth fighting for." Zarlak's gaze followed his, taking in the landscape that had once been so foreign to him. The jungle had never felt like a home, but the world was bigger than the battlefields he had known. He had spent his life fighting for causes that had never truly mattered to him, and now he was standing at the edge of something else, a life beyond war, beyond the pain of betrayal and survival. "I was never meant for peace," Zarlak admitted, almost to himself. "I was forged for battle, for war, but perhaps there is more to life than just fighting." Ethan nodded slowly, his hand resting on the hilt of his rifle, the weapon that had been his constant companion through all of this. But now, the thought of it didn't feel as comforting. It felt heavy. "We've both been fighting for so long. But maybe it's time we fight for something else. Something that doesn't involve killing." The words felt strange coming out of his mouth. He had spent his whole life as a soldier, trained to follow orders and fight for a cause. But that cause had been shattered. And now, standing next to Zarlak, he realized that the war he had been fighting wasn't the only battle worth winning. Zarlak's eyes softened as he looked at Ethan, and for a fleeting moment, Ethan saw the ghost of a smile, something fleeting, something human on the alien warrior's face. It was the first time he had ever seen Zarlak smile, even in the smallest of ways. It wasn't the smile of a warrior victorious in battle, but the smile of someone who had finally found something to hold on to. "We both lost so much," Zarlak said quietly, his voice tinged with sorrow. "But perhaps we can find something new together." Ethan's chest tightened at the sincerity in the warrior's words. The thought of together had meant so many things over the past few days: survival, fight, trust. But now it meant something more. It meant a chance at rebuilding, at finding a purpose beyond the endless war. It meant forging a new path in a world that had nearly destroyed them both. Ethan looked ahead, toward the unknown horizon. The future was uncertain, filled with challenges, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was hope. The fight was over, but the journey had just begun. "I'm ready," Ethan said with quiet determination, his eyes meeting Zarlak. The alien warrior nodded, standing tall as he had done countless times before, but this time his stance was different. It was not the stance of a fighter ready for the next battle. It was the stance of someone who had found a new purpose, a purpose that didn't involve war. Together, they turned away from the battlefield that had shaped them both, their footsteps light in the soft earth. The jungle was still alive around them, but now it felt like a world they could finally call their own. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to walk. And as they walked, side by side, the first real step toward a future beyond survival, beyond fighting, began.